Hey there, hope all of you are having as good a time enjoying the snow as you possibly can. Some of you have mentioned to me that in the Mac 121 class, Intro CNC, that we had kind of gone from a simple program into one that was quite a bit more complicated, kind of gone from 0 to 60 in a short amount of time. And one of the things that I noticed in talking with some of you is that there was some confusion about how to get the coordinates for the tool movement around that part, and a lot of it has to do with the radius of the tool and the difference between moving a certain distance and moving to a certain location. So what I've done here is I've put together I took a sheet of graph paper, and it's laid out in 1/4 inch blocks, 1/4 inch on the side, and then I've labeled those. I'm going to turn the light on here so that we've got a little better view of things there, and I'm going to auto adjust. Okay, so maybe that's a little bit clearer. But what I've done is I've labeled these locations. Here's a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 75, 0.75, 1, 1.25, 1.50, and so labeled it all the way up through 4, 4 1/4 up here. And then I've done the same thing across the x-axis on the bottom. I've gone 0, or the 0, 0 location right here, all the way to 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 1.0, 1.25, on over to 4 along that line, and 4 1/4 and 4 1/2. So you can see where everything's laid out. I showed the origin as 0, 0, and the axis lines in blue. Positive y up this way, negative x down over this way, negative y down this direction from the origin, and then also positive x out this direction. So set up just a standard set of coordinates like we've been working with, and then on the graph I've showed the outline of that object. It was 4 inches on the side with a 1/2 inch outside radius here, 1/2 inch outside radius there, and a 1/2 inch inside radius there, just according to the print. The other thing I've done is I've made a little movable disk that's that we can put anywhere we like for it to be, and that is exactly 1/2 inch, so it represents the size of the cutter, so it'll give us a good indication of what we're looking at. Now, what the exercise in the book told us to do was to start out at a location that so that the top of the cutter is right alongside the x-axis, and we also want to leave 0.100 between the vertical axis and the edge of the cutter. So I'm going to position that about where it needs to go there. So that looks roughly like 1/10 of an inch, and we'll make a dot there in the middle of that. Alright, so see, we've got a dot in that location. Now first thing we need to do when we get ready to cut is to move that over so that it exactly lines up with the axis. And we'll make another dot at that point, just a little bit more. Make another dot at that point. Alright, so this may be a little bit difficult to work with in just a minute, but we'll get it in just a minute. So what we've done is started about right here, and we've moved in to right there, so that when we run up this edge, that cutter will be right along the edge of the part. So now what we're wanting to do is cut right up the edge that way, and with a G01 command we can only go in a straight line until we get to right here. And once we get to right there, we have to start curving in some fashion. Get that lined up perfectly. If we go any further in a straight line there, we're not going to be cutting along that curve. So I'm going to make a point there. So we can see we've got a point right at that location. Alright, so this move here, up here, was a G01 up to this point. There's also a G01 from here to here, but we're not going to show that because I don't have enough room. Alright, then up here, our cutter's here at this location right now, and so it's going to cut right along that curve. And when it gets to the point where we need to stop the curve and start a straight line, we're at that point right there. And so I'm going to make another mark for the center of the cutter. That's a location that's going to be important to us in just a minute. Alright, so we've got a point there. Okay. Now, we need to cut along this line all the way to the point where we have to start making a curve again. And we'll make a dot at that point. Okay. Now, at that point, we've got to start going around the curve. By the way, this is another G01 move. And in case I don't think I mentioned it, this arc right here that we cut would be a G02. It is moving it's moving clockwise. Remember, clockwise, 2 syllables, so that's a G02. Alright, then a G01 straight over here to this location. I'll put the cutter back at the right place. And what the cutter's gonna do, we're gonna move it around as far through the curve as we possibly can, and we're going to wind up at that location, cutting right along the curve. I've got my line a little far over, I think, but anyway, the cutter will end up about right there at the end of our turn, end of our arc. So I'm going to place another dot right there. Okay. So this turn right here will be another G02, since it is clockwise, and clockwise, which means 2 syllables, G02. And it leaves our cutter at this point right here. What we need to do now is another G01 down that line, G01 down this line. And ordinarily we would have stopped right there, but that won't do it, because if we were to swing through an arc starting at that point, we would cut out some material up here that we're not supposed to remove. So what we really need to do is bring our cutter on down to this point so that it's ready whenever we get ready to make the arc, so it's at the proper Y location to swing through that arc. So I'm going to make a dot right there. Now, we're still not quite in position to start the arc because we're not on the arc. So we need to move over in the X direction to here so that this cutter is starting to make contact right there so that we can begin this arc. So I'll make a dot right there. Okay. Now we're now in the proper position to swing through that arc. Now we're going to be arcing through counterclockwise in this situation, counterclockwise, which means 3 syllables. So that's got to be a G03. And where we want to end up at the end of the arc is right there. After that, our arc doesn't, if we were to come out further on the arc, it It's just not correct. We're not accomplishing anything if we go further than that. So we'll stop at that point right there, and I'll make a mark at that point. You can see where we're at. We still, even when we end up at the end of our arc, we're still not ready to move on that direction. And the reason for it is we'd be cutting material up in here that we're not supposed to be cutting out. So even after we end up our arc right here, we really need to come down another 0.25 until the top of the tool just runs right along that line. So I'm going to make another mark there. Alright, so once we get our tool to that point, then we're ready just to make a final run all the way back down this direction. Alright, so this final pass down through here is going to be another G01, and we're going to end up over here exactly where we started, about 1/10 of an inch off of the vertical axis and with the tool right up against this axis here. So if you want to label those points, that's point number 1, and then we moved over to a little closer to the vertical axis, the y-axis, so that we could we moved further over in X so that we're right up against the part. So that's point number 2. You really can't tell it there, but that's point number 2. And then we've got point number 3, point number 4, point number 5, point number 6, point number 7, and this one would be 8, this one is 9, this one is 10, and then we come back over here to end up where we start, back at point number 1. So you can see all those locations. Now if we go back and assign coordinates to those, this place where we started it's down or negative 0.25, and it's over negative 0.25. It's actually a little further than that. It's 100 thousandths over that way. So instead of going just 0.025 from the axis, we've gone 0.35 from the axis. So on the X, this first point is negative 0.35 in the X. So go negative, my pen's not going to write, negative 0.35, and on the y-axis it's exactly on that line, so it's minus 0.25, minus 0.25. Alright, when we move over to point number 2 right here, we're still at the same y location. So if we write our coordinates down here, we're at the same y, but we've moved over in X to exactly that point there. So it'd be minus 0.25 on the X and minus 0.25 in the Y, because we're down one block, we're back one block in the X, down one block in the Y. So there's our coordinate for point number 2. Point number 3, you can just come over here and read it. We're up 3.5 inches from where we started. So we've come up quarter, half, 3/4, 1, up till we get to 3.5 inches. And we're still at the same Y location. We're over in a negative direction, 0.25. So the coordinates for this point are, as far as the X is concerned, we're minus 0.25, and in the Y we're at 3.5. Now if we want to come up to point number 4 there, we can see that now on the x-axis we're over 2 full blocks. If we come down here and take a look at what those 2 full blocks amounts to, that's a 1/2 inch. So we're over from the vertical axis 2 blocks, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch. So as far as the x is concerned, we're at 0.50, and as far as the y is concerned, we're up here at 4.25 inches. So 4.25. Now we'll move on to point number 5. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that. We're at 0.5 inches. We've come over 2 blocks, and as you can see, we're up here on the y-axis at 4.25. So that's where the y comes from. We're up here at 4.25 on the y-axis, 0.5 on the x. Okay, now we'll come over here to 5, and you can see we're still at the same y. We're still at the same height on the y-axis. So if I draw my coordinates here, the y is going to be still 4.25. Okay, and the x at this point now, you can see where we're at. We can come down here to where I've labeled it, and we're at 3.5. So we've come over 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, 1, blah 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 blah, all down the line until we're on this line right here, which corresponds to an x of a positive 3.5. So right here I'm going to put 3.5. Now if we take a look at number 6, on the x-axis, come down here to the x-axis, you can follow this line straight down. You can see that's at 4.25. Alright, so we'll write down our x coordinate as 4.25, and the y coordinate, we'll have to come over here and look at that. The y location is 3.5. So y then would be 3.5. Alright, both of those positive because we're up here working in the positive direction. Again, both of these are positive because we're working in positive territory to the right of the vertical axis to the above the horizontal axis. So we're still positive territory. This is positive territory in the y, 3.5, but it's negative territory on the x because we're over in this direction, negative x, by 1/4 inch. Alright, so come back over here. We've got 6 figured out. Now let's come down to 7. We're still at the same x location, so let's make it, let's jot it down as 4.25, and then our y location is exactly on this line right here. And if we come over here and take a look, we're at 1/4 inch above. This is 0. We're at 1/4 inch above here. So the y location is going to be positive 0.25. So we got coordinate number 7 now. Number 8, the only thing we've done is come in 1 block. So now instead of our x being 4.25, it's going to be 0.25 less. So our number 8 is going to be 4.00, and their Y is going to be 0.25 still. So you can see it's 4.00 and 0.25. Number 9, you can see we've come down one block and over one block. Now we're at X of 3.75, 3.75, and Y of 0, because we're down here at the 0 location. 0, 0 is this point right here. So if we haven't come up or down, we're still at 0 on the Y. So we'll just jot down the 0. You can even use a decimal place there if you want. But as we mentioned, if you come that direction, we can't cut along that line yet with a 1/2 inch cutter, so we have to come down one more block. So what that means is that point number 10 is at the same X location. In other words, we haven't moved left or right any from the last point. It's at the same X location. That means we're at 3.5, just like we were here at, we're at 3.75, just like we were here at number 9. See, it says 3.75. So number 10 is X of 3.75, and Y is now one block below the axis, so we're at minus 0.25, and you can read it right here. We've come down one block, and that's minus 0.25. All right, and then we've already got, for our GO1 going from here to here, we've already got the coordinates of that point, minus 0.35, minus 0.25. So now we've got all the coordinates that we need. We got them all worked out there and all jotted down there. Let me zoom that out so that you can get a better view of it all. Alright, so now we've got all our coordinates worked out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So now we've got to move on to filling in the blanks in our program. So be back in just a minute with that.